But if we can engineer our environment to make the healthier choice the easier choice, we're less likely to deplete our willpower. And what I mean by that is, how can you, I like to say to people, do an environmental audit. So look around at your environment and ask yourself, how is it supportive or unsupportive of my healthy habits? So for example, if you're someone who's suffering with anxiety or struggling with focus at work, let's just say, but you've got a million screens open, you've got a million alerts, you've got your phone on the table, your phone in itself is a micro environment. If you look at your homepage of your phone, look at those apps, those notifications you receive first. Are they the ones that are most supportive of your long-term goals? Are the apps, if you want to read more, is it a reading app that's coming up? Are you getting notifications about your meditations? Are you getting notifications about your workouts? Are you getting notifications about your stress management? If those things are important to you, like I said, with intrinsic goals, you want them to be salient as well. So take some time to audit your phone environment, audit your desktop environment, but then also audit your physical environment. Because where the eye line goes, the attention follows, and the brain is cued depending on what's in the environment. So you can reverse engineer your environment to support your habits in a way that, when you open the fridge first, instead of that kind of, birthday cake that's left over from the weekend being the first thing that you see, maybe it's chopped up cherry tomatoes and chopped up, carrots, or, if you're trying to drink more water, having a giant thing of water to cue you into at arm's reach in front of you at your desk to cue you into engaging in the habit makes it so much easier. And if we're not having to look at temptations, it makes it easier to resist them. And the brain has to make 250 food choices alone a day. And so each time you have to make a choice, you're depleting yourself again and again and again. So if we can engineer our environment that there's less of those choices, it makes it easier to resist temptation. And then over time, as our intrinsic motivation grows and we learn more ways to navigate temptation, then it makes it easier in those circumstances, like when you go into work, to realize, well, actually, today isn't the day for this. Or actually, I'm going to have one because I know I can get back on track quite quickly afterwards.
I think that these cues are really like or doing an environmental audit, as you said, is really the invisible driver of our lives, right? Even if you think of cues or prompts, let's say, your oven beeps when it's finished cooking. And what do? Well, that drives the behavior of you walking over to check on whatever you're cooking. You pull it out or you leave it in again and you set the timer. Same thing, right? When you go outside and it's raining, that's a cue. You're like, oh, I should get my umbrella out, and I open my umbrella, and so there's all of these different, in our everyday life. You're driving, you see a red light. That's a cue for you to press on the brake, not on the gas, right? Yeah. So these are all cues, right? These are all driving our behaviors. You said, what's on the home screen, right? Is it, do you want to meditate more? Are you getting, the notification? For me, I'm a Duolingo aficionado. So I have, Duolingo will prompt me if I haven't done my lesson, let's say for the day. One of the characters will be like, hey, you want to give up your, however many day streak you have, get on the app. And I'm like, oh yeah, I got to do my French today. So I think that thinking about setting yourself up with these, that environmental audit, I think is so important because it grabs our attention, right? The oven grabs our attention so that we don't burn the food, right? The green light prompts us to go so that the cars behind us, don't hit us or whatever. So I think that this is where we kind of, I was talking about how do we overcome motivation. I think that this is also, and I'd love your thinking on this. This is how we maybe circumvent motivation. As you said, if you open the door of the fridge and it's all the celery's already chopped up, you got salads ready to go. The dressing is freshly made, or your meats are marinated in whatever marinade. All you have to do is pull it out, kind of throw it all together, and then it's done, right? That's a way for you to overcome the motivation of okay, I got to marinate the chicken breast, then I got to chop up the tomatoes, and then I got to make the dressing, and then I got to do the thing. All of that, thinking about all of those things that you have to do, the chicken, the cutting, and the grilling, the this and the that, all of that is, as you said, it's decision fatigue. It chips away at your motivation. But if it's already kind of pre-done and you just have to grab it from the fridge, toss it together, maybe throw it on the skillet for a couple minutes, that environmental setup is how we can potentially circumvent or overcome the lack of motivation in that moment. Because there are plenty of times where I know that I have to get dinner on the table for my family. I often I like to sort of putter around the kitchen on the weekends, but during the week, it's like, we got to do soccer. Like, they got to get their homework done. It's like, then I got to drive them to soccer. And then I have all these different things that are vying for my attention. So I always meal prep. Like on Sunday, I take a lot of time to cut up all the things. I do the shopping, cut up all the things. So it's all ready to go for me and for the kids, so that when it's time I can put dinner together in about 20 to 30 minutes, because all the stuff is kind of pre-done for me. And if it wasn't, if I had the resources to have a chef, I totally would. But until that point, until I have that asset, that's what's going to work for me right now, is setting up my environment in a way that I know that when I'm in a pinch, when my motivation is really low, I'm stressed, I know we have 45 minutes before I got to get in the car and take them to soccer, that I can kind of whip something up for them in 20, 25 minutes.
And that's skill power at its best. You're not waiting to rely on your willpower. You're like, well, what skills have I got? What skills can I develop that are going to help me? And that's such a huge part of habit change. And I talked about implementation intentions earlier, but it's about knowing that we're vulnerable when we're stressed, knowing that we're vulnerable when we've got to get the kids out to soccer, knowing that these are the situations in which I go off track. And, I think it's important for people to take some time out when they're trying to think about habit change. And at the very, very get-go, ask themselves, what's going to get in the way of me being successful at this change? And if that happens, what options are available to me at this time? And exactly like we talked about, the scaling option is one way of doing it. Or asking yourself, so for a lot of people, stress might get in the way. So if you're asking yourself, okay, well, if I normally meal prep for the week to overcome this, what might get in the way of that? And how can I overcome that? And how can my most depleted self, most exhausted self, overcome that as well? Because again, we need to think about our future selves. We all think about our future selves as these perfect beings.
Yeah, Sunday morning when you have the whole day to lounge over a coffee and a croissant or something. Yeah.
Unflawed, flawless people. And we have all of the self-restraint and the willpower in the world, but we're flawed, and we have to accept that, and accept that we will give in to temptation. And so we need to approach it whenever we're creating a new change, asking ourselves, what's going to most likely to get in the way? And the thing is, you'll know that because it'll have happened time and time and time again in the past. And that's often the tipping point where people actually go off track. And it makes me really frustrated, because actually that's the learning point. That actually is the inflection point. That's a really important time where actually, failure is success if you learn from it, which was one of the conclusions of one of our studies of long-term maintainers. Those that were able to maintain their habits 5 years or more, maintain a clinically significant weight loss 5 years or more, versus those that actually went off track after a year or two. And what we found was that they were actually able to bounce back best from failures. And that's often because they were able to see their future selves and see the barriers and the blockages that would get in the way. And they were able to actually pre-plan and actually set up an environment for success where they increased friction to unhelpful behaviors and they increased fuel to helpful behaviors. And what I mean by that is they made those helpful behaviors more obvious, more salient in their physical environment, in their social environment, in their emotional environment. And they made those unhelpful behaviors harder to do. And that's a huge piece when it comes to long-term behavior change.